All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Hannah Crapeau, and I'm the Content Marketing Manager here at Certiport. We're so happy to have you joining us for our third and final Month of Swift webinar this afternoon. Now, this presentation is being recorded, so we ask that if you have any questions, go ahead and drop those into the chat or the Q&A feature since all of our attendees are currently on mute. We'll make sure to have Leslie and I discuss those as we go through our questions today. Now, today our topic is preparing higher education students for the app economy, and we'll be discussing this topic with our lovely guest, Miss Leslie Lehman. Leslie is Harry S. Truman College's Director of Teaching and Learning Programs. She also teaches child development courses and creates and leads the educator-focused professional development trainings at the college. She has completed Mac Essentials and Swift Coding certifications and supports the Innovation One Technology Training and Resource Center at the college. She's a master instructor for app development in Swift for the National Coalition of Certification Centers, and she has a special interest in equity, inclusion in education, and in all things play. So we're very excited, Leslie, to have you here with us. Thank you so much for joining. I know we gave a quick introduction, but do you want to just tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so I work as Director of Teaching and Learning Programs at a community college in Chicago that is one of 7 community colleges in our city. Our college is located as the northernmost of all of the city colleges. We have a variety of programs here, and my role is primarily in educator workforce preparation and training, continuing education opportunities for educators, and supporting our Innovation One educational technology resource hubs and labs.
Oh, here we go. I'm usually the one telling people they're on mute, and that was me this time. So it sounds like you span a lot of different areas and different colleges and things like that. So we're really excited to have you bring your expertise to us today. Now, your primary focus, it sounds like, has been in the past in child development and teaching and professional development, but now you are I want to make sure I get it right, master instructor in app development with Swift. So tell us about how you got involved in the Swift program.
Yeah, so our school submitted the request for proposal to be a community education initiative school in partnership with Apple. And part of that program design was to have integrated learning services across different disciplines, ages, fields, and locations in Chicago. Chicago, unfortunately, is a very segregated city, both humans and then resources as well, especially resources related to educational technologies, access to physical technologies, hardware, and then internet access as well. And in our request for proposal, we wanted to make not just a training program that was specific to our college, but a training program that integrated those services across the city and increased access citywide. Because what we found with a lot of technology and education, we're a school district that's recently adding a computer science requirement for high school. It's been in about the last 3 years or so, and don't really have a lot of digital literacy or media literacy requirements for younger grades. And so you get kind of this fractured experience, right? Parents might be getting one type of training, teachers another. My college faculty are getting a different type of training, and they're teaching CIS courses that are a much deeper dive in specific areas like information security and data and those kind of things. And we really felt like it wasn't supporting any of those unique populations. So we designed a resource hub where educators would get access to both trainings and resources and physical hardware to be able to use those in their classroom, along with professional development that was integrated across the city. So there was kind of a learning journey, both for the student and the educator. I do a lot of program and curriculum design and accreditation, entitlement, and kind of like dotting the I's and crossing the T's for our college. So in that way, I was attached to that project. And so one of the really important things about the project is that we attach people to it, right? And we attach them by by their skill set. So I was brought in really to support the educator pathways for that and making sure that our faculty were well trained, but also our Chicago Public Schools teachers had opportunity for professional development and training. But what that meant for that journey is that I had to do those trainings along the way, right? Like I had to be up on the very specific technical skills that we would be asking the teachers to be trained in later. And in that way, I became associated with NC3 and doing trainings through them. They have an amazing training model and am now a master instructor for Swift in that program.
I love that. It's been a full journey for you then, as you've been trying to get these resources available for teachers and for students in Chicago. So it sounds like you have taken the deep dive into this content, which we're really excited for you to bring your perspective. One of the resources we know that a lot of educators use for the Swift program is the Developed in Swift Explorations course content. So yes. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're leveraging that at your college and how it's being leveraged across Chicago?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is, it's bundled in a textbook in Apple Books, right? And it is free to use. And the curriculum has designed in it playgrounds that are kind of like small learning exercises that students can use where they get hands-on experience with coding, and then they kind of graduate to using the full version of Xcode outside of that kind of safe playground sandbox. And it's really an amazing curriculum because you have the opportunity to make it the size that you want to, right? It's designed to kind of take up the full semester long course if you needed to, but there's smaller learning experiences built into it so that you can give people kind of a taste of coding, or even just a taste of thinking about how computers work, digital literacy, information and security, and also some kind of like flexible thinking around coding as a language, right? And a creative thinking experience. We currently are using that curriculum in a variety of ways. So we are at my college at Truman, we're instituting a new basic certificate that's beginning this fall. That basic certificate is a career certificate with a dual pathway. One pathway is for people to be able to move into jobs in consulting and programming in computer science. And the other pathway is to have their computer science endorsement for public school teachers to be able to teach computer science at their school. And the way that that's designed is they take 3 fundamental programming classes together, and then teachers go on a pathway where they focus on educational technology and use of tech in the classroom. And then the programmers go into like a deeper dive on different languages and systems. And we've leveraged the Swift curriculum in that. And we also intend to offer a deeper dive into Swift using continuing education workshops that we will strategically stack with our academic courses so that someone can kind of move in both directions, right? So you might have someone who's taking a college level class, who's learning a bunch of programming languages kind of at like a tasting menu, and they want to do a really deep dive into Swift, and we can do that for you. You also might have somebody who knows that they need to use Swift for their job, and they're maybe looking for an advancement. They take a certification course, and then they think, wow, this is really something that I could do as a career, and they come back and finish their certificate or degree with us. And we want to have access in both directions because we find our students really need it.
Yeah. Well, with changing technology, I think it's no longer a linear pathway, right? There's a lot of kind of back and forth or hopping from different languages, like you mentioned, to others. So I think there needs to be a lot of flexibility that goes along with that. And I know our primary topic today is about how to prepare students, but I feel like you have a lot of experience in how to prepare educators, which I think is also really important. So what are some of the resources outside maybe of this Develop in Swift Explorations course that you find is helpful for teachers who are looking to advance or kind of upskill from things that they are currently teaching?
Yeah, absolutely. I think specific to Swift, I have a few favorite resources. One is to note that there is a faculty version of the textbook that has instructions for how to present things in the classroom, solved problems for the playground, so that if students are struggling or you as an instructor want to see what a solution looks like, because Swift is a very flexible language, right? There's infrequently one way to get to things, but it'll show you an example of a solved problem so that you can kind of backwards design from that. I also find that students often learn really well from taking apart finished code instead of trying to kind of code from the ground up.
Scratch.
Yeah. I also, the developer documentation for Swift, because it's an open source coding language is very robust and it's very well organized. So that's a place to take a really deep dive or to maybe kind of problem solve as an instructor, because students will always ask questions that you don't know the answer to, right? And so that's what the developer documentation is there for. The other resource that I really love, there's a lot of great kind of YouTube personalities that do trainings. One of my favorite is 100 Days of Swift. It breaks down all of the information in the textbook into kind of like miniature 10-minute activities. And I like to use that to refresh my own knowledge on something where maybe the syntax is a little bit difficult or different from another language that somebody's familiar with. And then also as a drill, because like any language, repetition is really, really important when you're learning it for the first time.
So there's so many resources available for teachers, but if we have attendees who are here, maybe teaching this content for the first time and are looking to build out their course curriculum, where would you recommend that they start? What's the best way to build their kind of semester-long course with all of these resources that you've mentioned? What's the advice that you would share with them?
Yeah, I think my personal strategy when I'm kind of putting together a course shell or a syllabus or building something in a learning management system, right, is to backwards design from my student learning outcomes. And so really taking a look at those student learning outcomes. And then I would start maybe next with looking at the textbook and seeing what are the subject areas that overlap with that, and then integrating those specific playgrounds, and then looking at the sequence as well, because it is in some ways a language that needs to be, there's certain concepts that are easier to learn in a particular order, right? And the design of the textbook is to kind of have that flow and then to iterate or to have repetition as needed. I think another thing that is really important to know is that I talked a lot about the playground exercises, right? But those playgrounds also are something that you can build yourself, right? So if you're seeing something and you're like, I'm looking at this and I know that my students are going to need a lot more practice with this particular concept, you can build your own kind of worksheet pages, for lack of a better word, but that involve your students needing to do actual coding to get them done in the playgrounds yourself.
Yeah, I think that those are incredible resources because a lot of teachers underestimate, I think, their own level of expertise and familiarity with their own students. So being able to be flexible and kind of make those adjustments with the curriculum that's already been pre-built is so important. And I wanted to go back to a comment that you made about starting from the learning outcomes and then moving backwards. So tell us how you determine what those learning outcomes are. Are those guided by like the certification exam, for example, or are those guided by specific objectives that you've put together? How does that work?
Yeah, it depends on my teaching context. So for academic credit courses I'm in a large district public school. So our student learning outcomes for any particular course are agreed upon faculty across all 7 colleges in our network. And that's something that's made as a collaborative decision. It starts with the individual faculty who's writing the course. It builds up to the discipline faculty, and then it goes to kind of open review across our college network, and then goes actually to our State Board of Education before we can institute new coursework there. And those student learning outcomes are informed by not only our faculty and their knowledge to what our students need, but also as part of our career technical programs, which our computer and information sciences fall under, we're required to have industry stakeholders and also a review board that we're responsible to, right? So a lot of like, what are our students actually going to need for careers? And we have to show that our courses lead towards careers as well. And I think that's a point where the certification becomes really important. And I think we definitely, when we're developing curriculum, we have in mind that we want our students to do really well on any certification exam that they need for an industry credential or to get a job. And so thinking about in that way, not just content alignment, but also preparing students for testing conditions, right? Especially our students that are coming straight out of high school have maybe taken a standardized test once or twice, maybe in 5th or 6th grade, maybe they've taken ACTs or SATs, but practical exams where you have like a more robust, you have to like find things in the environment, or you have to be able to answer questions in a variety of different types. They don't necessarily have that experience. So that's something we're really intentional with too, is making sure that our students are prepared for the testing environment as well as the content of the exam.
Yeah, there's a lot of preparation, I think, that goes into it, being familiar with the user interface, but then also being familiar with the content, to your point, that there's some preparation that happens on multiple levels. Mm-hmm. So certification, obviously the app development with Swift certification is something that you guys offer at your institution. How have you seen that that's been helpful for your students in answering to these industry representatives and getting students placed into different jobs?
Yeah, so one thing that we are very grateful to have as part of our Community Education Initiatives partnership is access to Apple Consultant Network and Apple consultants, both as mentors for our students in the field, helping them kind of find their, a best match and places that they might want to work, or talk about different professions that they might be interested in that are related to the certifications that they're obtaining. Also, we have found kind of like an interesting problem working in a city as large as Chicago is that a lot of our industry partner work is required just by our State Board of Education to be really like geographically bound, located here in Chicago, but we're really talking about positions that are remote, national, and international, right? So that's been a new challenge that we've taken on, helping students think about those type of jobs, getting them prepared for remote learning. How is being on camera different than being in person? How do I manage my own time? Teaching some of those soft skills as well. And another thing that we do for our students as part of our partnership is we offer scholarships for them to take their certification exams so that they can cover those exam fees, especially if they've demonstrated that they need those exams in order to get a job.
So tell us then, going back to covering those costs, how does the funding come through for teachers who are in a similar situation? I know in urban environments in particular, you come across a lot of students who come from Title I schools or who may need additional financial assistance. So what's the best way if you have teachers thinking, oh, I would love to be able to offer this certification program, but I don't know if we have the funding for it. What's the best way to secure that funding so students can earn the credential that they need for these jobs?
Yeah, I mean, we've approached workforce funding in a variety of ways. We have industry partnerships, right? So sometimes we have industry partners that will do early hires or internships for our students. And then if they do well in that, they will pay for their certification exams. We have a scholarship donation, and we've leveraged that scholarship to be able to be used both for certification exams for students, but also for educators who need the certification in order to be able to teach in their classroom. We also have as a career technical program, we have access to Perkins funding, and Perkins funding can be used for both faculty training and student supports. So I think it's about looking at both your local, state, and federal funding and kind of finding where to put the kind of the building blocks in the right place.
Yeah, and there's not a cookie cutter solution for every single institution. That it takes a little bit of creativity, but it's good to know, how some teachers are approaching it so that we can get hopefully more students certified and more students kind of prepared for the workforce and not have that financial barrier be what keeps them from excelling when they do have those skills. I wanted to dive into some other ideas as well. I know one of the things we talked about in our webinar last week was making sure that the community at large is aware of the work that these students are doing and the skills that they're earning. And one of the ways that they have done that at the high school level is having kind of these back to school nights or these app showcases where people come in and see the work that the students have created. Is that something that you guys also do at the collegiate level? And what does that look like?
Absolutely. And it's something that we do at the collegiate level with the idea of including learning at all levels in that, right? So one of the things that we do, we have a STEAM Ambassadors program. And
I love that.
Yeah, it's a really exciting program. So we have part of our city funding initiative is our city has funding set aside for 18 to 24-year-olds to be able to have job placements in the summer. And a certain amount of those job placements are given to public schools to hand out. So we have some of those allocated to us at city colleges. And we've strategically created a program around that where our students learn STEAM-based skills, coding being one of them. And then they go out into the communities, specifically to parks and camps that have public school children or that are publicly funded, like Department of Family Support Services and YMCA and those types of parks and camps locations. And they take those technical skills that they've learned, and they do miniature educational activities with middle schoolers. So that's one exciting way that we kind of do joint coding, kind of like boot camps or celebrations. We always do a celebration at the end. We've also done some interesting partnerships with Chicago Public Schools. So Chicago Public Schools has a parent mentor program called Parent University, where the idea is that parents take classes that help them to get jobs at the same time that their children are learning things, and that the learning outcomes for what the children are doing and what the parents are doing are interrelated. And so we've actually done the Swift curriculum with parents before, parents who are specifically interested in like, hey, my kid brought this iPad home from school and I'm not really sure what it is or what they're doing with it. And so using some of those fun early coding exercises as a way to get some tech literacy for them, and to also be thinking about what kind of careers might my child be interested in, especially these kind of more technical careers that parents might not be familiar with.
Sure. And do you find that having the parents involved is more motivating than for the students? It creates kind of a viral effect, if you will, of getting everyone kind of involved in the learning outcomes.
It's very exciting for families to do it together. It's very exciting for children to be able to show their parents something that they don't know how to do. And we also find that, you know, we do that as part of our experience. We do free field trips for Chicago Public Schools at our physical lab spaces where they can have hands-on technology, and we do some really fun things with them there. And the idea being there, right, that if the kids come to us and they have a lot of fun, then they go back into their school district and they request those kind of interactions from their teachers, right? And then their teachers have some good leverage to go to their business office and their principal and say, hey, we need resources and devices like this in our classroom. Our kids are asking for it.
Yeah, and that was something that was actually called out in our last session as well, is our panelist was someone who taught at the high school level, but he said, I have done a ton of work at the middle school and even the elementary school level to get these students kind of more prepared and excited. By the time they get to my classroom, they feel much more engaged. And so I think dipping down into some of these younger ages, although that might not be the students you have in your classroom, is so important for creating a pipeline of students who can fulfill these jobs that need to be filled.
100%. And I also feel like there's some misinformation about being like tech native or like kind of automatic tech literacy for younger children. I think what we find in our environment is that by the time a student is transitioning from high school to college, for me, they might have some really excellent technology-based skills, but they're really specific to the device or the software that the child is familiar with, right? They might have some great photo editing skills because they're really interested in TikTok and Instagram, right? They might have some amazing, like, fast typing skills because they love using a fast moving platform like Twitter, but it doesn't mean that they're familiar with a more formal hardware like a computer. It doesn't mean that they have digital literacy and safety skills. It doesn't mean they can compose an email right. And so I think sometimes teachers can be afraid to use technology in the classroom because they feel like, well, the kids know more about this than I do. And I really don't think that's a fear that any educator needs to have. And I think that things like digital media literacy and safety are things that need to be explicitly taught to children.
Yeah, absolutely. That it starts at the foundational level of being safe, and then also learning how to use skills in a social situation versus in a professional situation. I think those are two completely different skill sets. And that's where these courses like the Develop in Swift Explorations course and some of these other certification programs really come into play, is that it helps students be able to use skills and young professionals in a work setting. It's not just about using these skills for social media, it's about using them to be able to succeed in a job. And in thinking about jobs, have you had students go from your program to become app developers? What does that transition look like as they've left your college and gone on to the workforce?
Yeah, you know, our partnership for continuing education initiatives is pretty new. And so, like I said, our specialized certificate, so we've always, of course, had different computer information systems, certificates and degree programs at our college. And across the 7 colleges, we have different specializations in just any area you can think of related to using a computer for work. But the specific, so the new certificate is designed to be specific to OS, iOS, and coding and app development. And that is really just launching in the fall. So we're really kind of excited to see the fruits of that over the next couple of semesters. It's a 5-course sequence, so it usually takes our students about an academic year to complete it. what we have seen a lot of our students doing is getting their toes wet, right? So I have a lot of computer science students coming to me who are like, I've taken a couple computer science courses here and there, and I don't really know what I want to do. Do I want to do programming? Do I want to do design? Am I interested in user experience? Am I interested in information security? And so that has been a really good experience for them to get, because we teach our classes. We've strategically built lab spaces to mimic professional environments so that they get that kind of professional feel when they're in the classroom. And that's been a kind of like mock work experience for them so they can try different things.
I like that. Doing these tests and helping them practice these skills in really safe spaces. So you mentioned the playgrounds, and really setting up these sandboxes so that students know what it will be like to use these skills in the workforce. I think that's super important. So for educators who are listening, what advice would you give to them about building a new app development or coding class? Where should they start? What pearls of wisdom, if you will, have you learned over the course of your tenure that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked a lot about how our program is strategically designed to hit learning at all points and kind of moving, up and down and out, right?
Yeah.
And so I think my recommendation would be to do some good research about what are the grades below you required to teach, what are the grades above you required to teach, and then what's going on in the industry that you specifically live in, right? Like what kind of jobs are actually hiring right now, and what are the skills needed for that, and to try to develop learning outcomes related to the needs of those different environments. The other thing that I really recommend is, again, your students and knowing how to leverage what students are already good at and build on that so that you can hit breadth and depth at the same time, right? And there's a lot of exercises embedded in the curriculum that allow students to leverage skills that they already have. So those might be language skills, they might be hardware use skills or use of other softwares. And you can really build up on that instead of having to start completely from scratch with lessons, but it really takes evaluating your own students in your own network and knowing what they're at and where their skills are.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. We've already had a couple questions coming in through the chat. One of them is about professional learning. So for our educators, there's a link that I'll drop into the chat about develop in Swift professional learning, and it's a self-paced course. Is that something that you've used with your educators, and what has been your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, we're, like I said, we're lucky to partner with NC3. And so NC3 does the training for our educators. And that's one of the trainings that I do. And so that is a training program that it is strategically social, right? And brings educators and IT professionals that work at schools together to learn the curriculum in a really fast-paced, deep dive environment, both in person and then virtually. The self-paced learning, I think, can be really, really powerful and this is the same thing I tell my students, right, that are going to take online asynchronous classes, is like, if you know that that's the type of learner that you are, right, the resources are very, very good, but it means that you are kind of handling your own schedule and you're figuring out your own points of like where you need repetition and where you can move faster. So I think it's more of a like knowing yourself and your current capacity and your learning style of which type is the right match for you.
Wonderful. I think that's an excellent point. Any other thoughts or information that you want to share that you feel like we haven't covered?
One thing that I bring up a lot when I talk about coding exercises, and especially as somebody, I don't come from a computer science background, I come from a child development background and a teacher training background, is I think the power of teaching coding experiences in bringing them into interdisciplinary areas, right? So maybe you're not a computer science instructor, but you're thinking, you have some interest in coding or your students are asking about it. The real power of coding is that it's the language with which we not only speak to computers and other devices, right? It's the language with which we control them. And I think something that's not obvious to children, and maybe not obvious to all adult users, is that we tell the computer what to do. We tell the internet what to do. We tell the software what to do. It doesn't tell us what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing the back end of the coding, even if it's not something that you're going to use for your career, is, I think, a really powerful experience for learners to understand how the devices they use every day, or the softwares or the search engine that they use every day is designed, right? Because it's designed by people for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Well, one other question that we've had come through, and that I know a lot of teachers love being able to hear more about, is what is your favorite assignment or project that you give to your students to help them practice and learn their coding skills?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, there's like a lot of really fun ones, but in specific to what's available in the textbook, there's one that's called Bouncy Ball, where they get to make their own miniature version of a video game. And then it's really easy to kind of scale up or scale down. So you have like a kind of a puzzle to solve where you're dropping a ball and there's different barriers that you can bump into. And then it kind of refreshes the way the screen looks depending on how well you did. And that's a really exciting one for learners. And it's one where if a learner's really interested in it, there's kind of no end to how many different kind of little tricks or barriers that you can add to the screen before the ball has to drop down. And it's one where I've seen students take a really deep dive and they really, really enjoy it.
And I love the idea that it can be something so basic, right? That the end result doesn't have to be this end user experience level creation for the students to be able to glean important lessons. And so I think being able to start with these basics and utilize these resources that you've mentioned is really how you set your course and your students up for success. So thank you so much for going through all of those with us. Anything else that you want to share before we wrap up?
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share with you. It's something that I am really excited about, and I'm always excited to talk about anything related to curriculum, supporting students, helping students enter careers. So please, please reach out with questions.
So if people want to be able to connect with you and thinking about that, where's the best place for them to reach out?
I will go ahead and put my email into the chat. That's the best place to get a hold of me.
Awesome. And we're so grateful to all of you for being here today. Just one final point while Leslie's dropping her information into the chat. We offer professional development certificates as part of this program. So if you've been able to attend any of our webinar sessions or multiple sessions, we'll be getting those professional development certificates out here in the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. And we're so grateful for all of you taking the time to learn with us. And Leslie, thank you for sharing your experience. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been really fun.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your afternoon.